Hello, my bookish friends. Welcome to my September wrap up. I'm going to start out with the three DNFs I had for this month. The first one was the handyman method, and this one just didn't work for me. The dialogue was cringy, the writing style was strange, and I could have gotten past that. I was intrigued enough by the premise of this man buying this supposed haunted house. I don't even know if it was a haunted house, but something strange about the house. And he finds these videos on YouTube that's supposed to like teach him how to renovate and how to be a handyman, and how to fix things in his house. And so I was interested enough in the premise and I could get past like the weird writing, but then it was very chauvinistic and I think it was done on purpose, but it was still difficult to read. I still didn't like it. And then it started to get vulgar and he would call his wife these terrible names and I just didn't like that. I just didn't like it. And I'm like, if I'm already feeling this disconnected to the story and I'm only like a third of the way in, then I think this is just going to be a waste of my time. So I decided to DNF that one. So next we have Hemlock Island. And I was really looking forward to this one. This is about a woman who has a vacation home on a little island and she needs to rent it out in order to make money, but she's really not happy about that. She doesn't like the idea of having strangers in her house. And then people start to complain to her. They're like, oh, we found these ritualistic looking bones in the backyard. Or we found a closet that looks like somebody was locked inside it and they were trying to claw their way out, so there would be like claw marks and blood and maybe like a fingernail or something. And so they're like, oh, we keep finding all these strange symbols and things. And so she decides to head up there to figure out what's going on. And one of the things about this story is there was way too many characters and they were introduced like so rapidly that it kind of puts your head in a spin. Like, I don't know who these people are. I don't know how they correlate to the main character, like what their relationship to her is. And there was just too many of them too fast. And I also felt like the book itself moved a little bit too fast. And that sounds weird. Like, most people want a good page turner that moves fast. But in this case, I thought it was a little bit of a detriment to the story because it didn't give it time to build up any creepiness or any atmosphere and made it feel more like Scooby-Doo-ish. And so I didn't really like that. All these creepy things were happening, but they didn't feel creepy. It's like if somebody was telling you something very mundane. That's how I felt about it. They're like, oh, this creepy thing happened. And you're just like, okay. Like, I don't know. I just didn't feel any of the eerie vibes. I didn't feel any creepiness. There was no atmosphere. I just couldn't connect to it in that way. And I really didn't like the writing style. And that's really strange to me because I know Kelly Armstrong is a good writer because I've read other books by her. I've read the YA trilogy, The Summoning, and I really enjoyed it and I really liked it and it had a good creepy moments, but this one just had none of that. And so I was really surprised. And I don't know if maybe this was like a rushed job, like this book was just needing to come out and so she just kind of rushed it. I don't know. But I know she can write. I know she's a good author, and that's why I was so excited for this book to see what she would do with an adult novel. And it just fell flat for me. I just didn't like it. And they were already making dumb decisions. I was only on chapter 7 when I stopped reading it. And they were already going out to investigate an intruder in the woods without putting shoes on and stuff. Like, really? Like, I don't know. I just didn't like it. So I decided to DNF this one. And then next was a YA novel called The Wicked Unseen. And this one, I actually was enjoying it in the beginning. I thought the writing style was strong. I really connected to the main character. I thought she was great. I loved her family, and it had like a Halloween party in the beginning with her family, and it was very like Halloween vibes and all the things I was looking for. Not necessarily in September. I kind of wish I had waited till October, but since I decided to DNF it, maybe it doesn't matter. But yeah, I thought it was very strong in the beginning and I thought I was going to really enjoy this book. But I had two main concerns with this book, and one was it was starting to get a little too political in a way. Like, it was very grounded in today's world, and sometimes I just don't really like that. I want something that I can escape into without thinking about the world and society the way it is and blah, 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 and all the problems it has. I just want to read a good book and be entertained. I don't necessarily always want that stuff shoved in my face. So I just wasn't in the mood for that. And also, these people were very black and white. You know, it was the main character and her family were definitely the good guys, and everybody else in the town was the bad guys. There was no shades of gray. They all sucked. And this girl goes missing, and the main character seems to be the only one that cares. Like, her and her family are the ones that want to start a search party and go look for her, and everybody else is just like, yeah, we don't need to do that. We just need to pray for her or whatever, you know, because they're all very religious. But and I don't really like that. If you want to speak out against religion being the bad guys, you know, like, that's your right or whatever. But I don't like stories that are very cut and dry. These are the good guys and these are the bad guys. I like a little bit of complexity to my stories, like that Midnight Mass show by Mike Flanagan, where you have the religious fanatic lady that's definitely the bad guy, but then you have the priest, and he's also the bad guy, but he's not necessarily the bad guy at the same time, because he wants to do good. He wants to do what's right, but he's just been misguided and deceived. And, you know, and I had another example. I can't remember what it was, but it was kind of in the same vein where, you know, you have the one that's very fanatical and very like heretical and hypocritical and all of that, but then you have the other character that's religious, that's a little bit not that way and trying to do good, but is maybe misguided. And I just prefer that. I just don't like the whole like cut and dry bad and good thing. But then at the same time, I understand it's YA, and YA is not really known to be really complex. So I don't know. I just don't think it was the right time for this book, to be honest. I just read Mr. Magic that kind of had the same against religious theme to it, and I really didn't like that book at all. And so I just wasn't in the mood to dive back into that. So I might come back to the story at some time. I don't know for sure, but for now, I just wasn't in the right headspace for it. So those are the 3 DNFs that I had. And then I also read an arc from Nat Galley called Let Him In. This is by William Friend. And I enjoyed the story for the most part. I wouldn't say it was like a favorite all time, you know, but it had all the creepy vibes I wanted. It was about imaginary friends, which I always enjoy. It's about this widower who's taking care of his 2 daughters. And they see this man in their room one night. And so, as any good dad would do, he searches the house and can't find anything and just decides they had a nightmare. And as time passed, they stopped mentioning him and just went on with their lives. But then one day, they started talking about a new imaginary friend that they would call the Black Mamba. And he could turn into like different animals and different things. But then it turns out they're like, oh no, he's actually a man, you know. But anyway, so it was a fun premise. I enjoyed the book. I thought it was fun, but I wasn't like completely enamored with it either. And I was a little bit let down by the ending. I thought it was a bit anticlimactic, and it was a little bit ambiguous, and I'm just not really into ambiguous endings. Sometimes if it's done really well, I like it. Horror books don't have to end on a good note. They don't have to have a happy ending, and I'm okay with that type of ending, but I don't like it to be ambiguous to the point where, like, I don't know for sure what happened, or I don't know exactly what was going on for sure. That I don't like. So it doesn't have to have a happy ending, but it does have to have an ending I can wrap my head around. And so if it's too ambiguous, I don't like it. So this was a case where it was a little bit too ambiguous for me. So I would probably give this about 3.5 stars. Next, we have my book club pick for the month, which was Mosaic. This is about a woman who refurbishes stained glass windows. And so she goes to this little church that's in the middle of the woods that has like a big, huge stained glass window. Sorry, I keep knocking the camera and it keeps... So if it's like moving, it's because I accidentally kicked my tripod stand. So this woman, she's at this little church in this little town, and the priest there is asking her to refurbish this stained glass window. And so as she does so, she begins to see that the picture that's depicted isn't like the normal picture of Christ or the normal like Bible story picture or something you would expect in a church. It seems a little more sinister than that. And so she's trying to decide what this image is and what it means. And so it had a great setup, it had a great premise, and it was just a short little novella, but I don't know, this one didn't really work for me. I didn't really care for it. I didn't really like the direction it went. I don't really have that much to say about it, honestly. It was very kind of slow and boring, and I just couldn't get into it. So I would probably give this a 2 stars. I know that's so sad to say, but I'd probably give it a 2 stars. So moving on to my physical books, I'm going to start off with the 2 mangas that I read. It's the third and fourth in the Spy Family series. I'm not going to be very specific about this because we are getting farther into the series and I don't want to spoil anything. But they meet a cute little doggy that becomes part of their family. So I loved that. So I'm still very much enjoying this series and I can't wait to continue. So in my Book of the Month Club box, I got The Stranger Upstairs. And this was fortunate because I also had a NetGalley arc of this and I prefer the physical copy. So that was fortunate that it lined up that way that I was able to read a physical copy of it. So this is about a therapist and she buys this murder house because it's cheap, because the realtor has to disclose that a murder took place there. But that doesn't bother her. In fact, she kind of likes that it's a murder house because she's planning on doing like a whole social media thing about it. So anyway, so she gets this house for cheap and she's going to flip it. She's going to renovate it and then make like $1 million off of it. And she's going to put all the renovations on social media so everybody can follow her and see what she does with the house. Well, then other suspicious things start to happen and people in the town really don't like the fact that she's there. And then she discovers that the person who owned the house before her disappeared. And so she's trying to figure out what happened to that person. I thought this was fun. I know not a lot of people have been liking this one. It's been kind of mixed reviews, but I feel like it's mostly been bad. But I personally enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I would definitely say this is more of a thriller. I know it says it's a haunted house tale, but it is, but it isn't. Like, I would definitely say this is definitely a thriller. I wouldn't call it a horror. But it's interesting because the main character is a very unlikable person. She's definitely not a good person. But at the same time, it's like sometimes when I have a dislikable person, I just can't get into the book. I just don't like the main character, so I just can't connect and I don't like the book. But in this case, it was one of those odd times where even though she was dislikable and she was dishonest and she was all these things, she was at least interesting to follow and she was at least well fleshed out, I felt. And so I didn't like exactly connect to her, but she didn't drive me crazy. She wasn't annoying. And so if I'm going to have a dislikable character, at least have it be an interesting one instead of an annoying one. And there's kind of a fine line between that sometimes. But I feel in this case, she wasn't annoying, even though she was dislikable. And I did see some things coming and then other things were a surprise. But I don't know. I think for a debut novel, I think this was pretty well done. And I didn't see the ending coming. I mean, I kind of saw parts of it, but like the main part I didn't see coming. And then like the very, very end I didn't see coming. And then the epilogue was a fun surprise. I thought some people didn't like the epilogue, but I liked it. I always like ending on a certain way, but I can't really say what that way is without giving things away. But anyways, I thought for what it was a pretty decent, entertaining read. I would probably give this a 4 star. So because this was September, of course I had to read The September House by Carissa Orlando, and I freaking loved this book. It's one of my favorite books of the year. I really, really enjoyed this haunted house book. So this is about a woman who purchases a haunted house, and they find out pretty quickly that it is haunted because the ghosts aren't shy. They all come out of the woodworks, and during the month of September, things get a lot worse than normal. The walls bleed, and there's a entity in the basement that wakes up, and he's really evil and dangerous, and the ghost seems more agitated during that time. And so her and her husband decide to stay because the wife loves this house. She's always wanted to own a house like this, and she fell in love with it, and she's willing to put up with the hauntings if it meant staying in this house. Well, after 4 years, the husband's like, I've had enough. I'm not living in a haunted house anymore, and he leaves. Well, the daughter, she calls her mom and was like, what's going on with dad? Why did he leave? And she doesn't want her daughter to know that the house is haunted because she knows that she won't be okay with her staying in a haunted house, and she wants to stay. And so the daughter's like, well, I'm going to come visit you and we're going to figure out what happened to dad, because apparently she's been trying to call her dad and text him and he hasn't been answering. And so it's more like not just that he left, but that he's actually missing. And so the daughter comes back to try and find out what happened to her dad. I just thought this was great. If you like Grady Hendrix, I think you'll enjoy this book because it's got that same style where it's a little bit funny, it's a little bit comedic, but then it's also paired with like some really gruesome imagery and some scary moments. And so I really enjoy that. I thought it was a lot of fun. I will say it's not a perfect book. The main character, her reactions don't always make sense. There's especially one part towards the end, and I can't tell you what it is, but her reaction just makes no sense to me. And I was like, well, why is she just sitting there doing nothing? And the daughter, oh my word, I did not like the daughter. She was so annoying and abrasive, and I just did not like her at all. But despite that, I still had to give this 5 stars just for pure enjoyment, because that's just mostly how I rate books. Is if I really enjoyed it, I'm going to give it a higher rating, despite its problems or whatever. So this is a 5-star book for me, despite not liking the daughter and despite having a little bit of other problems with it, but I thought it was great. So because it is September, I wanted to read a few books that were more academic or had like a school setting. And so I picked up this YA novel. It's called Lying in the Deep by Diana Urban. And I really enjoyed this. I thought it was great. So with YA, sometimes I can get into the high school drama, and then sometimes I find it really annoying. And luckily, this was one I was able to get into. So the first half had a lot of angst and a lot of drama and a lot of like relationship stuff, but I was really into it. I was really hooked in, and I found it fascinating and interesting. So this is about a group of young college kids who are on this new program that's like a campus at sea or campus cruise or something. And so they're going to college, they're taking classes, but they're on a cruise at the same time. So while the boat's pulling into different ports, they're doing their classes, and then when that pulls into port, then they're able to do some traveling and some sightseeing and tourist stuff and all of that. So I thought that was a really neat concept. I haven't seen that done before, so I thought that was interesting. So about halfway through, one of the classmates gets murdered, and so they're trying to figure out what's going on and who murdered her. And it's actually the main character's best friend, or former best friend, I should say, that was killed. And so she's trying to find out what happened to her friend. And those parts, I thought the pacing was a little bit off. They just barreled ahead like really quickly, like, let's run over here and talk to this person and run over here and do this and then run over here and do that. And it just felt like it was just like run, do. And it was a little too fast for me. I felt like I was getting a little bit of whiplash. But then the ending I thought was really good. I didn't see who the murderer was, and it had a couple of twists that I really enjoyed. I didn't see them coming. And so I thought this was pretty good. I thought this was a decent YA thriller. So I would give this probably about 4 stars. Then I picked up College Weekend by R.L. Stine. This is a Fear Street novel. And I just love Fear Street. I grew up on Fear Street, and I will always have a soft spot in my heart for Fear Street. And this was great. I thought it was a very enjoyable, fun read. I will say at the end, the main character makes a really, really dumb decision that just made me roll my eyes like, wow, you're an idiot. But outside of that, I thought this was great. I thought it was a lot of fun. So this is about a girl. Again, she's a young college student, and she's going to a college campus to meet her college boyfriend. And so she's going to spend the weekend with him. Well, it turns out that when she gets there, he went on like a camping trip with one of the college clubs. And so his friend and roommate's like, well, you can just hang out with me until he gets back. And he keeps making excuses for why he's not there. Like the car broke down and then I can't call you and blah, blah, blah. And so she ends up spending a lot of time with this guy. And at first, she really kind of likes him and it's like, oh, nice. But then he starts acting really strange and like weird and stuff like that. So it's kind of funny because, this was written in the 90s and a lot of this plot would not make sense if you had cell phones. So that was kind of entertaining to see something written in a different time that kind of dictates its eeriness and its atmospheres all around not being able to call someone for help or not being able to call somebody to verify certain things. And so that was kind of entertaining. But yeah, this was great. I would give it 4 stars. Then I read Teacher's Pet, and this is a point horror novel. And I was really excited for this one because this is again about some college kids and I think she's in college. It never actually says if she's in college or high school, but the way that she's like not chaperoned at all, even though her teacher's with her, I would say it's probably college. But anyways, so this, what I assume college girl, she goes to this writing conference to learn about how to write horror novels. And that immediately made me want to read this book because I myself have gone to a couple of writing retreats or writing conferences, I should say. It was right during the pandemic, so I wasn't able to go in person. I was planning to go in person with my friend, but they had to cancel it because of COVID. And so then they decided, well, we're not going to cancel it. We're just going to try and do like an online classes. I wasn't able to go in person, unfortunately, which would have been a lot of fun. But because it was online, I was able to take more classes because normally you'd have to choose like 12. They'd have like a set of 5 or 6 classes and you choose one of those classes to go to during that time. Well, because it was online, they were like, okay, well, we'll record all of these classes. And so you choose what class you want to do, and then you can come back later and watch whatever class you want. And so for the same price, we got to watch like double or maybe even triple the amount of classes that we would have been able to see in person. So it actually turned out pretty good. I even got to meet Brandon Sanderson taught one of the classes, so that was a lot of fun. But anyways, that's besides the point. So that immediately made me want to read this book. And that aspect was a little bit downgraded, a little bit downplayed. It wasn't like a huge part of the plot or anything, but there was a little bit of it, and I enjoyed those aspects. And I really enjoyed this book. I thought it had a good setup and it had a good atmosphere and a good setting. But unfortunately, towards the end, it just, I don't know, the plot was just a little bit ridiculous, a little bit weird. I didn't hate this book by any means, but it wasn't like a favorite either. I'd maybe give it like a 3.5 stars. But anyways, it wasn't terrible. It was fun for what it was. And then I read The Yearbook, and I didn't really like this book, if I'm being honest. So I love the cover, and so I wish it had been more interesting. But we're in the mind of an adolescent boy, and some of his thoughts, I was just like, ugh, I don't like being in this boy's head. And at first, I thought it was going to be like just a mundane, like the nerdy guy picks off all the cool kids in his school, haven't seen that before. Although when this was written, we probably really haven't, not a whole lot, but I don't know for sure. So it ended up being more like cosmic horror, and I'm just not a big fan of cosmic horror, and the writing wasn't great, and I don't know, I think I would have preferred the mundane pick off the cool kids one by one than what I got. I didn't like the direction it took. I didn't like the writing style. This just wasn't really for me. I'd maybe give it a generous 2 stars. So that's all the books I read. I didn't read a whole ton in September, but it is what it is. You win some, you lose some. I hope if you like this video, you'll go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to my channel so you'll never miss a video from me. And I'll see you next time. See ya.